Welcome to the May 26th edition of the PFF Forecast. This is an awesome episode. I know I say this a lot, but this one was really great. We have Benjamin Solak on the podcast, and if you've listened to Ben or read Ben's work before, you'll know this is going to be good. If you haven't, this is awesome. We talk about the entirety of the NFC East. We talk about Dak, where he would rank as a quarterback, whether the Cowboys or the football team are the best team, who has the best shot of not being bad between the Giants and the Eagles, what those quarterbacks need to do to succeed. It's a great conversation. And he gives, as a second straight guest, with a recommendation that you don't want to miss. So you'll want to stick around till the end. Let's rock. All right. Once again, I want to commend you. I got to shout you. I got to give you praise. You wore a decent shirt. Is that Sweat Taylor? What is that? Might be. It looks like it could be.
I thought you were going to give me, like, we came up with this recommendation idea together, and recommendations have been amazing.
All you. It's all you. I'm going to give you full credit for it. It is a great thing. Now, I'm worried. Now it's a lot of pressure. Okay.
I actually think I know what my recommendation is for Sunday.
Oh, buddy.
But I'm excited. Hopefully this book ends up ending as well as
it started. Gave it away. He just gave it away.
No,
it's
there's more than one book in the world, George.
That's boring. I'm not telling you.
I mean, we have so much work to do on the product side this week. I might not read anything but R for the next like four days. But I'm going to try.
I also have a running list of great recommendations. Ben Solak's is awesome. We talk about the NFC East. I'll also say this. We started off with the Julio Jones trade because he had some really interesting things to say, and that discussion is 10 or so minutes, maybe even closer to 15. So if you want to skip that part and then come back to it later, you can. We get to the NFC East eventually, trust me. But he has some really interesting things to say about Julio, what he would actually trade for Julio, which is interesting, and it was a good discussion. So we kept it in there. So that's there for you. But a lot of really good stuff here. He does a tremendous job of breaking down this entire division. Before we get there, I do have to tell you about a couple of things. If you are not listening to other PFF podcasts, you're missing out a little bit because there's some really good ones, and there's some ones that you can learn some kind of like different stuff from as opposed to this podcast. A couple of them, the fantasy podcast with Ian Hartitz. It's fantasy season, believe it or not. And you should go and start preparing for that. And of course, the 2-for-1 Drafts Pod with Austin and Mike, which is fantastic as well. The other thing, if you are looking for a place to invest, maybe you're going to make some investments.
Can I update the people on Symbol?
Yes.
Symbol? Okay.
SIMBULL is the place to go. It's a stock market for sports teams. And so you're listening to this about the NFC East, and you'll go, hey, maybe there's some stock I want to buy.
My portfolio is up 39.54%.
Really?
Yes. Since I started out.
Wow.
Yeah. I look, and I'll tell the people what I got. Okay. And I did sell a little bit ago. My teams. Let me see my teams. I have one share of the Sim 49ers. I have one share of the Sim Broncos. One share. We talked about this on the show of the Sim Cowboys. One share of the Art Smock Sim Panthers. Zach Wilson. I have one Sim Jets. And lastly, I have, as per our religion, a share of the Sim Falcons.
Have to. You absolutely
buy and hold, baby.
You absolutely have to. Look, you saw how much joy that just gave Eric. I would go to Symbol. Yeah. And if you deposit $10 at Symbol.
Look, it's better than crypto right now.
Yeah. Skyline Chili currently trending better than crypto right now. Use promo code PFF, deposit $10 at symbol.app/PFF, and you'll get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for $10 of investment opportunity at Symbol. Eric will keep you apprised of his investments as we go. And now, Benjamin Solak. It is now time to welcome on. This has been a long time coming because Benjamin Solak is a fantastic friend of ours on the social media sphere. He creates great content. You can find him at the Draft Network, where he is a senior college football writer. He's also the deputy editor of the Bleeding Green, and he does the casting of pods.
Well, not only that, but he's, according to Peter Schrager, does a lot of the analytics. Right?
Yeah. welcome home. Yeah, that's where I
Wow.
belong, baby.
You want to talk about
Forecast.
that? I'll give you the floor. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, numbers are great, and when you look at them, you learn things that they tell you. It's good to know them, and I'm proud to be an analytics man.
How
crazy was it when you heard that was said on the most watched football morning show in the world?
The first thing is I was like, I gotta explain this to my mom. This is gonna be so confusing. Be like, all right, no. So he read it from somewhere else, and he thinks I do analytics. I know, Mom, I write. Trust me, I know I write, but there are also numbers that I do, and like that was my first thought. All together was really cool, and it was awesome. And the main thing I feel like that always gets talked about, at least for me, like I am a blogger, right? Like that's how I came up, right? Is there was nothing more frustrating than when somebody with a big audience said, well, I read this really good thing on this one site, I can't remember where, and it was what you wrote, and you were like, frick. If you said my name, like that would have been big for me at this stage. And I think I'm beyond that stage of my career a little bit. I'm not so much like hustle and grind and claw for every follower, which thank God. But for Peter to know that it was important to be able to say like Ben Solak is the guy who did this was sick. And so that's just big shout out to Peter for doing that. And man, I really hope Justin Fields is good beyond his first read, baby, because that's a lot of eggs in that basket now.
Well, I think the whole we're very polarized, like everything. But I think the one thing that like 90% of us hope it will happen is that Justin Fields is good. Like I think that's like the Capitals are thinking about selling the Bears, and I'm just like, fuck it, just sign it over to Fields at this point. Like
the group of people that don't want Fields to be good is a group that I do not care to alienate myself from.
Yeah, right.
You guys can go where the sun does not shine. I have some hypotheses for why you were called a man of analytics, but the one that shines out to me is that I think continuously smart football it merges. So it doesn't matter whether I think of a guy like Seth Galina, who we were talking about before we aired the podcast, who's very much about scheme and writes great articles about that. And yet, you might think if you weren't familiar with him, you'd say, "Oh yeah, I'm sure he's a guy that uses analytics." You might even call him an analytics man.
Yeah.
But it's like the key thing here is that it doesn't matter what your primary way of attacking football analysis is. Like you can be intelligent in both. It's not against the rules.
Right, and it's like I feel like one of the most common refrains from the analytics community is always like, "This isn't a monster. It doesn't live in the closet. It's not." Got 12 eyes and 7 limbs and you can't comprehend it. It's just like we're just trying to understand what's happening the same way that somebody like just with their eyes with heuristics is. It's just we're using numbers to explain the information to get it across. It's literally just quantitative instead of qualitative. So for me, like, because why I got on there was contextualized quarterbacking, which is quarterback charting, which is what you guys do. And the reason that I do it, I'm sure the reason you guys do it is because instead of saying he throws deep a lot, I want to be able to say he throws deep 22% of the time because that's better than being able to say just a lot. Like you say 22 and then you say a lot and now everybody gets it. All right, so it's doing it a little less than a quarter of a time and that's a lot relative to everybody else. That's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle for contextualized quarterbacking. It's just being able to say this is exactly how much he was asked to do it relative to this guy and relative to past Ohio State quarterbacks and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very like, that's what you would do. Like if somebody offered you a job and was like, we're going to pay you a lot, you'd be like, what is a lot? Like we need this number. So it's not a big scary thing. It's very, very surface level.
It's not,
and it's helpful.
It's honestly nice of you to talk about Eric like that because we get a lot of he's a big scary monster that lives in the closet.
Yeah. I was thinking more of Steve, to be honest, with the fro and the 6'8" and whatnot.
We get Seth Rogen, we get Ben Roethlisberger's cousin. Now, in fairness, I've seen Eric throw a football.
I have a better arm than Big Ben.
You are throwing on a line 30 yards more than that.
I'm not even trying to be a dick. But I think that's really cool. And I also think as the interesting part about the evolution of PFF, like we all did charting at one point. Like not everybody's going to from here on out, but like you and I did it. There is something interesting about the appreciation for where this data comes from. And especially like for somebody like me, there isn't a big bar for understanding every little nuance about everything football. Like I build models and I try to understand those models, and then I defer to people like Renner and Gale and people who sort of study
Steve, Seth, Bruce,
all those guys to sort of like fill in the cracks. But Ben, you guys are scouting players, and what I think is really cool is you're not just looking at 4 games worth of data, or not even 4 games worth of data, just watching 4 games and saying, I think this, and I think that Derek Clausen does as well. You guys I think it's cool to sort of appreciate where every data point comes from. And while it's not necessarily the most scalable thing in the world, it often gives you an appreciation. That's why people, Belichick makes his coaches pad and stuff like that. Because you do gain an appreciation for what data means, where it's coming from. And when you get a humongous data set, whether it be from us or whether it be from, NGS or something like that, you really do have an appreciation for the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it and how valuable it can be.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I would also call out, Ben, that you implement the word frick very nicely.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to, I keep it clean, but I get texts from my mom when I don't. And so we got to keep that locked down. She loves to consume the content. That's great. Appreciate the support. Wish there was a little bit less censorship, but I understand it and I respect it.
We get comments from listeners, and that feels like comments from my mom.
By the way, both sets of our parents listen to this.
Yeah. Look.
I've never gotten a message from my dad who listens to the show. Hi, Dad. To tell me to clean up my language.
It's other things that he wants you to clean up.
Yeah. Like this beard. Yeah.
Understandable. Okay, so we're going to talk NFC East. That's why we brought you on. But I thought the Julio Jones stuff is just out there. And so I just wanted to ask you before we started on the NFC East. You're a GM. Let's assume like a team that is actually competing, because I don't think the Houston Texans are coming in for Julio anytime soon. What would you offer for Julio Jones?
Right. That's a very good question, because what I'd be willing to offer is late first. What I would offer, given the way the Falcons have grossly mismanaged the situation, is less, because they can't sign their rookies. Yeah. They are in such a bad cap situation right now where, it's being presented as if they need to trade Julio in order to make that space. There's a lot of ways to make that space. It's not like they won't be able to get the rookies in the building. But they're in such a dangerous cap spot. And now you have a very emphatic statement from Julio Jones in terms of how much he wants to be in Atlanta, to the point where, you're trying to get that deal done for it too. It was Mike Renner who I tweeted it listen, if the Falcons get less for Julio than they got for Sanu, which was pick 52 overall, I can't. My mind is gonna break. And Renner hit it with, I wonder if they're gonna get more for Julio than they gave up for Hayden Hurst. And I was my God, the Falcons, what are we doing? This is not good. But that's what you're looking at. You're looking at basing the deal around a 2. And frankly, it is absurd to think of any receiver, even on a rookie contract, in my opinion, returning the value of an early 30s Julio Jones on his current deal. Which, will Julio show up and play for $11 million in 2022 non-guaranteed? Don't really know that. And that does throw a monkey wrench into it a little bit. But for me, this is to say Julio Jones has lost a step is to erase the reality of Julio Jones beginning at a point that's above all but 3 receivers in the league. So yeah, he's not as good as he was. So he's now top 8. I'm willing to send a first for that. With where the Falcons are in this negotiation, I'm trying to get away with sending them a middle 2. And if I can get that done, especially as a competing team, yeah, it's a home run.
Yeah, see, that's where I get a little bit nervous about this, because I think the Falcons are holding out for a 1. I think they have been holding out for a 1 for quite some time. It's why, and Jason Fitzgerald did a great job of explaining this on his show. They did the Ryan extension, closing the freedom there. They didn't do it with Julio. They now have freedom to trade him. But I think they've been holding out for a 1, and I think teams are rightly not wanting to trade the 1. And there was an article by Mike Sando in The Athletic that said, look at teams from picks from 19 to 32 have been a 1 in 3 hit as far as getting their 5th-year option, so on and so forth. And I don't think it looks at the other side, because their conclusion was then, okay, the Rams are kind of sharp for trading all their 1s. And it's Brad looked at this and he said, take away draft pick compensation. Every single time on average, a team overpays for the player they traded a 1 for by 20%. So not only are you foregoing that rookie contractness, right? You also are overpaying in it, and that's not even considering the draft pick compensation. So I fear that with Julio Jones, you trade a 1. And here's the other thing. It's not this year's 1. You have no idea where that pick ends up in round 1. Like for like the Minkah Fitzpatrick pick, that pick ended up being a relatively decent pick. The Deshaun Watson was clearly, interesting. That one became the 4th pick, but the Laramie Tunsil pick, like all those, like the hard part is you don't actually know it's a late 1. And I think the issue in the NFL, and we showed this in an article the other day, is being elite is pretty stable. Everything below elite just shuffles every single year. You go from being above average one year to terrible the next to below average. And like the problem is if you're not one of those super elite teams, your draft pick has nowhere close to being a guarantee and being in that back half of the first round, even if it were true that those picks have lost hit ability over time. So I get nervous about that. And that's why I think that there's this chasm here and we haven't seen a trade happen, because the Falcons are holding out for a 1. And every team, I think, is rightfully saying, no, like we're gonna start the price at 2 and go from there.
Who should trade for him, Ben? Who are your list of teams?
Kansas City, Kansas City,
Oh
Kansas
my
City.
God.
Please, Kansas City. I like Green Bay. I like San Francisco. Cleveland also makes sense. The Browns fan whole like, last time we got a star receiver, it was Odell, and it didn't work. We should get more Jarvis Landrys. No. Julio Jones, that's who you want.
Yeah, but
so to me, those are teams, right, where it's like, can you guarantee for all 4 of those teams you're going to be a playoff team and your pick's going to be in the 20s? No, but also like at some point you got to act like it. And especially I think for a team like a Cleveland, where it's, if there's going to be a weak point on that offensive side of the ball, it's the wide receiver depth. Man, like adding Julio, it gives you Odell Beckham insurance, Odell Beckham injury insurance, and it gives you a dynamic field stretching guy, which I don't really think you had even when you had Odell healthy, because you'd rather use him as a separator. So I think those 4 stick out. I like the Kansas City thing just because, why not? Yeah.
I wouldn't
Tampa
be able
Bay
to...
is adding everybody. You might as well.
I actually would hate
I'd
it.
have to retire. Like, I don't think we could do the podcast.
No, but here's a question, because I have a couple, because I don't think he's going to Kansas City. I don't think Kansas City has the cash, let alone the cap space, to go through with this. That's really the tough part that the Falcons are in too, is a lot of these teams, like I'm looking at half the league barely has enough money to sign their draft picks right now, let alone the cash to, because of all of the sort of rearranging they've had to do, all the money they've had to pay out. The Browns make a little bit of sense in the sense that they, I think, are one of the most well put together teams in the NFL from a risk reward, like a risk standpoint. Like they've spread their risk out quite nicely with deals like Jadeveon Clowney. But like, doesn't the Odell Beckham trade sort of like exactly prove why this is not a great approach? Because you're saying they're lacking wide receiver depth, and it's like, well, the quickest way to lack wide receiver depth is to trade a valuable asset in Jabril Peppers, the 17th overall pick, and I believe what was a number 3 third round pick, for concentrating that risk on one player.
Yeah, but I'll say this:
like
the one thing that I would say that I think makes a lot of sense, Ben, from the Cleveland standpoint. And I am on board with not sending a 1, because I think they have their hands tied behind their back. But he's certainly worth, from a value perspective, like that level of play. Julio Jones is, I don't want to say this in the wrong way, he's not like the anti-Odell, but he's not Odell in any way, shape, or form. Like the way that he carries himself, the leadership that he would bring, they haven't won a Super Bowl in Atlanta, but it's not because he hasn't prepared in a way to win them a Super Bowl. Like, that dude works, and that's a reason he's been so successful. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why I'd be so sad to see him leave Atlanta, is I really think that might be the best place for him to win. Like, I think Cleveland is good, but like Atlanta's finally got, a coach who I think from an offensive perspective is going to do the right thing. They have a GM that is obviously, going to try and do the right thing as well. So that's what's tough for me, is I feel like it makes sense for Cleveland because he's such a good character guy, but that's a huge loss for Atlanta.
Atlanta, I think, is like 7 wins right now in terms of over-unders, and Cleveland's at like 10, I want to say, which I might be low on Atlanta there. But I think that Cleveland is expected to win more.
Yes.
It's in terms of like Julio's I want to win kind of projection. Because if it's not Atlanta, then it's got to be a team that like made the playoffs last year and like seems legit.
Yeah.
So Cleveland makes sense. Indy's the one that people get excited about that I don't get, and it's simply I don't think Ballard would do it because Chris Ballard. It's an aggressive move, and
Yes.
he's made one in the last like 3-4 years. Two, I don't think that Julio would want to go play for that quarterback.
I would
Yeah,
agree.
they did trade the 13th pick for Buckner last year, and then gave him
Buckner
the,
and Wentz, right? That's their two big
but,
trades.
and
right?
the Wentz pick, as you well know, like that complicates things because you don't know if that
Yes.
trade is a first or second rounder next year. So that muddies the waters for them being able to trade for Julio because you sort of have that correlated sort of bet that it's either a first or a second. The one that we talked about the other day, which I think bears mentioning, is the Los Angeles Chargers. I do think that the Chargers go from a fade for me to at least a neutral, if not a buy, if they get Julio. To me, that's one that makes a lot of sense.
I do think that makes sense. The Atlanta Falcons, by the way, Ben, in case you're new to this whole thing, they're over under. Yeah, it's 7.5, juiced 155 to the over. But in
It
this
hasn't moved, by
in
the
this
way.
world, the Atlanta Falcons are always Super Bowl contenders. So
I was gonna say you guys are big Falcons guys, right?
I made more bets on the Falcons, and honestly,
Once George was like the Falcons and the Browns, both winning teams, I was like, wait a minute now.
look,
That's something else.
I also do. I love Kevin Stefanski, and I hope things work out for Baker. And I think Andrew Berry's the GM of the year. But
Does that
let's
muddy
be
the
like,
waters?
let's just be a little cautious here.
I do think that the Baker's upcoming contract, in concert with Myles Garrett's contract, that does make a Julio trade harder to do.
I would agree.
The money for a Julio trade makes no sense for anybody, which is why Atlanta is dumb. If you really requested a trade before free agency, then you should have handled it then when teams had the money to quote unquote make the mistake of trading for Julio.
One of the interesting things I wanted to point out, by the way, Brad sent this my way. I had this intuition here, was really interesting. The first highest paid, fourth highest paid, and seventh highest paid wide receivers are all coming from trades from other teams. Left tackle, highest, third highest. Interior, second highest, third highest. Edge, third highest, fifth highest. One of them, Frank Clark. Corner, highest paid corner, fourth highest paid corner came from a trade. And soon to be, the top two safeties are going to be players that come from trades. Trading for veteran players is expensive as fuck. Because you end up having to justify. Think about Kansas City sticking their neck out for Orlando Brown. The fact that as the clock keeps ticking, this contract just gets more expensive, and Orlando Brown hasn't played it down for them. The leverage that a player has when he's a veteran that gets traded to a team. That's the hard part when I look at the Julio thing, because you're not only taking on a draft pick compensation, but you're also taking on what is going to be a new contract to make him happy.
That's a great point. Okay, we're going to move on to the NFC East because I can already see the comments from you guys lied to me. This is not the NFC East.
By the way, we appreciate the comments.
The NFC East. So I want to set the table here by looking at the win totals, and Cowboys 9.5, pretty evenly juiced, plus 107 over, minus 130 under. Washington Football Team is 8, minus 141 over, plus 116 to the under. The New York Football Giants minus 130 is over 7, and plus 107 is under 7. And the Philadelphia Eagles, Benjamin Solak wearing a 76ers hat, a team that's actually winning in Philadelphia, at least last I checked. At 6.5.
Should have worn my
you
Trust the
really
Process
should have
shirt.
worn your Trust the Process shirt. I would have made fun of you for dressing
No collar.
not well.
Yeah.
But yeah. 6.5, minus 155 over, plus 127 under. So I want to start with the Eagles. They have the lowest win total. And I just want you to so what does success look like, in your opinion, for the Eagles this year? And I know that's going to be different, and that's why I'm excited to hear it. What's a successful season for them?
Knowing what Jalen Hurts is. Yeah, if this is a clear franchise guy, tremendous. Build around him. We're going to get coordinators in the building who have experience with running quarterbacks and kind of your Greg Roman to your Lamar Jackson, if you will. Right now, the Eagles haven't made any sort of signs that they want to go that direction. But if Jalen Hurts is clearly that guy, then you have to incorporate the quarterback run. Awesome. We're going to build around him. We're going to build the offensive line. We're going to have a dual-headed backfield. It's going to be great. Jalen Hurts is clearly not a franchise guy. Tremendous. Awesome. Lose games. Get a decent pick. Go get another quarterback. I was big on the Eagles taking a quarterback this year. Don't fully understand why they didn't do it. But all right, you've got Jalen Hurts now. You've got him for a year. Figure out what he is, and then be able to choose your path there. nightmare situation is both reasonable and also, because I'm an Eagles fan, I'm wearing nightmare goggles, already happening, where he's a very high floor player because the running ability gets him out of bad situations. The locker room loves him. The energy, the effort is great, right? He's a tremendous dude Monday to Saturday. And there's a temptation to continue investing in him for another year and seeing if he can get over that hump and be a clear impact starting caliber quarterback. I think that Hurts is going to have a very long NFL career sitting on that fringe because he's got such good character to him. He's such a likable guy. I was joking with another Eagles fan recently. I watched the film and I think to myself, all right, I haven't seen Hurts make enough NFL throws to really like believe in it. And then I listen to him talk. Rents due every day. I'm listening to payment. I'm like, let's go, baby. He's an NFL quarterback. I'm ready. Like, he's such a magnetic dude. And so there's going to be a temptation to continue investigating that when I'm not sure if the film and if the product, especially as a thrower, will bear out that he's worth that time and he's worth that investment. And so successful season for the Eagles is right now the team is completely identityless. Don't know who the starting quarterback is. Don't know who the premier weapons are. The big feature guys, the blue chippers, are all getting old. Lane Johnson's been banged up. Brandon Brooks been banged up. Jason Kelsey's going to retire. Fletch is banged up. Brandon Graham is 33. Like, everybody is over the hill. There is no identity right now. New coaching staff, nothing. So you got to know what you are by the end of the season. And that's either we've got a young quarterback, we're going to start to build around this guy, or we don't have that and we fully need to now reset, get a new face in the building, and start a new identity from there.
One of the things that we used as a reason to bet their under last year was the injuries to Brandon Brooks, right away. That was like the first sign. Mm-hmm. And it just got worse from there, right? Andre Dillard, it never got better for them. They get a little bit of stability this offseason up front. Is that a place where you look at that team? Because I kind of agree with the market. I don't think they're going to be very good. I think, much to your point, this is a year where you figure things out. This is not a year. I think if you go 2017 Buffalo Bills on it and make the playoffs somehow at 9-7, like, I almost think that's a step back.
Right.
Do you think that having a stable offensive line, though, makes people like me underestimate the team?
I think it certainly helps. And it goes back to like kind of the old adage. I don't really know if it's actually an old adage, but the idea of fix your offensive line before you try to figure out what you've got in your young quarterback. Because if your offensive line's bad, you ain't going to know. There's not going to be enough like clean, actionable reps to say like, this is what this guy can be. So he's going to be running for his life. Your rookie response to pressure is typically panic, unless you're like Justin Herbert and just for some reason weirdly good. And so I think that it helps you in that sense. It's worth noting Doug Peterson's out, Nick Sirianni's in. The entire offensive coaching staff gets redone except for one spot, and that's Jeff Stoutland, who's the offensive line coach and the running game coordinator in Philadelphia. And Stout's just the man. Like, the Eagles run about as diverse of a running game as any team in the league, at least off my eyes. And a lot of that goes to Stout, and they've developed well. Dillard aside, that first round pick, they've done a good job with younger players, with middle round picks, and developing those guys in the backups, being able to get them out there. This man got Halapoulivaati Vaitai a $50 million contract, and that did not go well for the Lions because Vaitai was fully a Stoutland, product, and so that him staying indicates just, and you have all the veterans as well, that the Eagles' offensive line is probably going to be really good. Their run blocking is probably going to be really good again, and that's definitely to Hurts' benefit. With that said, who is good at football outside of the offensive line on the offense? There's no answer. And Miles Sanders is an uncertainty. Dallas Goedert probably is. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Jalen Reagor, Devontae Smith, Kenny Gainwell. We do not know anything. And so a good offensive line is great. But if you don't have actionable weapons, if you don't have a quarterback who's a consistent thrower, which Hurts wasn't last season, you don't have a consistent running back, which Sanders wasn't last season, we're gonna test just how far a good offensive line can take you here in Philly. We're gonna find out.
Yeah, Jeff Stoutland, by the way, third in PFF history in WAR generated by offensive line coaches, behind Dante Scarnecchia and Nebraska's own Bill Callahan. So very, very good there. And they drafted a guy we liked, Jack Driscoll last year.
Love Jack Driscoll.
So that was the one place where I looked and I said, that hurt them last year. That was the first time in Wentz's career he played without a top 10 O-line grade-wise, and it absolutely tanked him. And if they could be better there, I'm not saying that's how they win, but it might be a faster way, to your point, for them to figure out what they have there.
Well, and there's a running element to Jalen Hurts that in my opinion, was not a big enough part of the offense.
100%.
And that, like, I would leverage the hell out of that, especially because, so you mentioned the throwing, and I want to ask you this. To know that Jalen Hurts is a guy that you can rock with, how much of an NFL thrower do you need to see? Because, like, Lamar Jackson, he's not going to look like an NFL thrower in a lot of situations, but he's dynamic as hell because of the different ways he stresses the defense, and then he can make enough throws where, you know, he puts you in a bind. And I would say, look, there's probably still some question marks with Lamar Jackson. So what do you have to see from Jalen Hurts to make that commitment next year?
Yeah, he's got to be a better thrower than Lamar is. He's not as good of a runner, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, right, if that Lamar line, right, that like holy line of demarcation is kind of, it's tricky because Lamar was an MVP. Like, he's not just like passable. You know what I mean? He's fully there. And it's not like a Jeff Driscoll situation where it's like, oh, fun for a couple weeks. Oh, we forgot that he's fast. And then it's like, all right, he's bad. You know, the biggest problem with Hurts as a thrower is the Kyler problem and the Russ problem. He doesn't like throwing middle of the field.
Yep.
And maybe it's because he's a little short, and maybe it's because, especially you saw even at Oklahoma, where they're really good at opening the middle of the field. The eyes just sometimes lie. Like, he had picks in college where you're like, that linebacker's been there the whole time, dude. Like, this has been the entire time. That is the most difficult area of the field to throw to in general. That intermediate area of the field where you have to worry about linebackers dropping, safeties coming downhill, and corners in coverage. Every angle is possible from a defensive perspective. And so it's a tricky area to throw to. And if you're not confident in your velocity, which Hurts doesn't have a ton of mustard on the ball, and you're not comfortable in your processing, which has always been his biggest problem going back to Alabama and Oklahoma, you're going to avoid that area. And the Eagles really, really did with him over his 4-game stretch. If you can't access that area of the field, and schematically your play caller has to call passing plays to respect that and to keep you away from that, that's where we start to wonder, like, why isn't this Kyler Cliff thing working? It's because they try to throw it middle of the field. It doesn't really work too well. And oftentimes Kyler just ends up scrambling out of those. And he can throw as pretty of a 40-yard 9-ball as you like. That's a very difficult offense to keep stable across the course of a season in terms of a passing game. And all you saw was like a shoulder injury to Kyler. And that Cardinals running game completely fell off the rails. And all of a sudden they're losing a game where they scored 14 against the Patriots. You know what I mean?
Have to hit doubles.
They were a different offense. I mean, we were talking about this with Kyler. That intermediate area of the field is so often where you attack middle, right? 10 to 19 yards. And the guys that destroy that area of the field consistently are Tom Brady. I mean, Aaron Rodgers to a slightly lesser degree. Drew Brees always crunched that middle of the field area. When
Rodgers started hitting the middle of the field again, he became an MVP. Like, that was that part of the field is so valuable. And our thing is like that 10 to 19 range. That's where you look to find some instabilities. Like, you look at like Trey Lance, for example, more yards on passes more than 20 yards downfield than between 10 to 19. One of the reasons we think Justin Herbert might regress, almost more yards on 20-yard passes downfield than between 10 and 19. You have to be able to hit doubles in the NFL because, the defense is the easiest things to take away. It's pretty easy to tackle in the NFL, and it's pretty easy to take away deep balls if you're, that middle part of the field is a hard part for a defense to defend, but it's quite easy when you don't attack it.
So is Hurts then a guy? Because, like, he's obviously, you mentioned he's like a great guy. He works his ass off. So you go, okay, well, he's
Seems
worked
like
his
a great
ass.
backup for Carson Wentz.
He's worked his ass off for a while. Like, how much do you expect him to legitimately improve? And is this really down to scheme? Like, would the right scheme make him look like a starter, and the wrong scheme make him look like just a complete bum? Is that where we're at? Because you look at the receivers and you go, okay, at least they invested in Devontae Smith, and they they theoretically should have guys that could get open.
Right. So how much better do you expect him to get? Definitely some. We played 4 games. And so to sit here and be like, he's not going to be an NFL thrower is just ludicrous, right? Like, we all sat here and said that about Josh Allen, and we were right. And then he just became something else, and so the projecting development is impossible. Cover your eyes, spin around 3 times, and throw a dart. But he's doing all the right stuff in terms of like private quarterback coaching, and we know how much limited CBA time, limited practice time via the CBA affects your ability to develop in season. So out of season work is so important. I think that he's going to become a better passer in the NFL. With that said, the current level is quite shaky. So it's not like, oh, just one step forward and we're good. Like it's going to be multiple steps in terms of accuracy, throwing with anticipation, being able to manage a pocket, so on and so forth. So he's definitely going to get better. And it's a question of how much better and how quickly, because like I said, you don't want to be putting yourself out on a string, on a line, just kind of waiting for him to finally get over the hill, because this will be the year where he gets there. That's very tough. That can hurt your team building and hurt your ability to put a good roster around him. And then how much of it comes down to scheme? A ton, but the scheme has a lot more, in my opinion, to do with the floor than the ceiling. If you built the perfect scheme around Hurts, you'd be able to beat every single bad team. Because if you've got a defensive coordinator who just doesn't know how to make these numbers work, or just flat out a defense that doesn't have the bodies to make these numbers work, you're going to be able to play 11 on 11 football. And that's always to the advantage of the offense. They know the play call and the defense doesn't, and they've got all 11 guys involved. Especially with a runner like Hurts, who could physically take on a linebacker in space, an NFL-sized linebacker. Yeah, like that's you're going to be able to beat bad defenses. And then you're going to hit playoff caliber teams. And it's not going to be as easy. And that's purgatory. It's where you're Andy Dalton, and you get far enough away from the first overall pick for the team to get better, and never close enough to the 32 overall pick to right. And obviously, like, Dalton and how he played is not how Hurts played, but perfect scheme gives Hurts a very high floor. Bad scheme can take his floor really low. So it's a question of, can you really scheme open a whole passing game if a passer is allergic to these areas of the field, or if he doesn't throw with timing and anticipation? And the answer is, like, there's definitely a cap on that, and that's very, very scary.
Well, and this will get to our next question, which is how much better are the Giants and the Eagles? Because I do think about this, like, for a second. To me, I look at the Giants and I think about they're exactly what you're talking about, which is, if I could scheme a situation where my quarterback if I could scheme a situation 20% better for my quarterback, and he has all the positive Hurts has and all the negatives Daniel Jones doesn't have, like, that's a playoff team for the Giants, because you look at everybody else on that team, and it's a fairly solid roster, Jason Garrett aside, right? How much better? But the problem is with the Eagles, I just don't think the talent's there and the other 21 players on the team. How much better do you think the Giants are than the Eagles going into this season?
I think the defense is impactfully better right now. I have secret hopes that John Gannon, who I really like, the Eagles' new DC, is like a genius. And they drafted Milton Williams, and I was like, bam, they're doing tight front, 3 down front, baby. Here we go. But, like, we have no proof of that yet, so hopefully that'd be great, but we don't really know. I like him a lot, but I like Patrick Graham, the DC of the Giants, a lot, and I know I do. I've seen it. I've seen him do it. They built that secondary out very, very well. And then that defensive front, they're definitely overpaying Leonard Williams, but it's okay because he's good enough to be disruptive for 17 games. If Aziz can be healthy for them and can translate for them right away, Ojulari, their second round pick out of Georgia, that's going to matter a lot, because edge pressure, I think, is your biggest question on that depth chart. But that defense started to come home right across the second half of the season, and that's nice because healthy Saquon, nickel and dime passing, it's only going to get you so many points. But if that defense can control games for you, you can beat the bad teams, right? And then you can start to put out a 500 season. And in the NFC East, that might be enough. So I think that, right, like you were alluding to, especially when we start to widen the view to the roster, Giants are measurably better at a lot of spots. Offensive line is the question, and it's not that it's the worst offensive line, it's that Daniel Jones will take any bad offensive line and make it way worse. And right, it's that inability to prevent a mistake from snowballing. And we know how much turnovers are impactful on a game level. Even if they're playing fine on a season level, you can just lose a game with a turnover. It's that impactful. It's one in the loss column instead of one in the win column. And so it's difficult to have faith in Jones behind an offensive line that's probably going to play Will Hernandez again, and Andrew Thomas is probably going to start. And I really thought they were going to do more to add to protection in the draft. I will say that this blitz of receivers is exciting for New York, though, because Jones is going to get the ball out of his hands quickly. It don't really matter who he's throwing to. So you might as well just load up on receiver talent, ask them to do the work for him. And Galladay, Sterling Shepard, those guys will be impactful. We'll see what Kadarius Toney does. We can hope that he's impactful as well.
Yeah, the Daniel Jones thing's interesting in the sense that he graded better for us than I think his statistics would suggest, right?
By a mile.
Like in 2019, he averaged 6.6 yards per attempt. He averaged the exact same in 2020, but his PFF grade was about 10 points higher. He limited turnover-worthy plays by about a factor of 2, while increasing his big time. Like in 2019, all these Giants fans were in our mentions because he had like a 5-touchdown game against Washington, a 3 or 4 touchdown game against somebody else, and he racked up stats. Last year, that didn't happen. He only had 11 touchdowns, but there were some things that came bubbled up that were better for him. What you have to, I guess, hope for. Offensive line play, generally speaking, guys start out slow, even guys as highly drafted as Andrew Thomas. And then Daniel Jones somehow lucks into a season where his turnover-worthy plays are not caught, or his fumbles don't get recovered by the opposition, et cetera, because I do think long-term, that level of negativity on a play-for-play basis will hurt you. But we've seen guys like Bortles, we've seen guys who are like, highly picked guys in great rosters have lucky seasons, and that's almost enough to buoy, especially in a division this bad, buoy a team to 10 wins or so.
Well, let me ask you this, Ben. I'm curious because you could kind of go both ways. The Bortles thing is interesting because like Bortles had those turnover issues, but he also just like wasn't particularly accurate with the football. Yeah. Is Daniel Jones, is he accurate enough as a thrower? Can he make the throws? And it's more about tightening up like, hey, just don't fumble 25 times. Or
he can. Yeah. I like to bully Seth because Seth's like,
Daniel
Jones is fine. I'm like, he's absolutely not. But the reality is, he probably is. When that 2019 class came out, I did not like Haskins. I did not like Locke. And I was kind of a little bit like, Daniel Jones. And then he was picked 6th. And I was like, okay, we got to chill. This is too much. I think that he is accurate enough. The thing is, Jason Garrett or otherwise, the area of the field into which he's accurate enough is the short area of the field. He is a quick game passer. He is a nickel and dime passer. Always has been. I don't think he can be more. There are some times where the deep ball is beautiful. That Darius Slayton week 1 touchdown, I think against the Giants, it was like, whoo, let's do that all the time. He doesn't. He can't. There's just inconsistency there. So the issue is he's accurate enough to get it done. And I think they're barking up the right tree with the Kadarius Toney selection in the sense of let's get really good yards after catch guys because we're going to play quick game. And, Toney is a hotly contested prospect. I don't know how impactful he can be year 1 because I don't know what routes are going to be available to him in year 1. But that accuracy, it's certainly there enough. It is what you're saying. It is like you'd love to be able to say, all right, Jones, just play the offense and then get out of our way. Like just be a guy we win with. But he has a history of making backbreaking errors that are not win with errors. They're lose because of errors, right? And that's the difference between him and like a Baker, where Baker, you can say, all right, good system, good weapons, win with. And Baker like generally doesn't make too many boneheaded plays. Jones, it's erasing errors. And it's a lot easier, I think, especially when you're a veteran in the league, to like get better at the spots where you're marginal instead of like erase the spots where you're bad. That's what we often see, especially when quarterbacks tail off. Like I'm thinking about Wentz. It was, oh, he's gotten away with all this. Now he isn't. And so I don't think Jones is going to be able to take that out of his game. And that's why he's a tough horse to back.
Yeah, that bears out in the data. Negatively graded plays are more stable than positively graded plays, right? Like it's the Matt Ryan and Shanahan system thing where, you find somebody who can extract a bunch of positive plays out of you and you're an MVP. And, with Wentz, it's like the same thing happened in 2017. And then, those things go away. And now all of a sudden you're just a guy that generates a shit ton of negative plays, unfortunately.
Carson Wentz catching strays was minus 20,000,
right.
and
that's
it's
not
happening.
He caught a lot of strays.
So to sum up the bottom side of the NFC East, the Giants 7 minus 130, the Eagles 6.5 minus 155 to the over. So like you adjust those, and it's only like 4/10. I'm doing this in my head, but like 4/10 of a win in adjusted total difference. The Giants are 4-1 to win the division. Eagles are 5-1. Does that make sense to you, or are those mispriced?
Oh, I think that the Giants make sense, and I'm not surprised the over is juiced. I do think the Eagles are a little high. It's not a good roster. It's and I don't know, the quarterback focus is always critical, and it's important to understand how that's going to affect the team. But when you widen that scope and you start to look at the Eagles defense, brother, they don't have a linebacker. They don't have a second corner. They might not even have a safety. McLeod's getting older and his play has been dropping off. Harris was available late for a reason. They did the whole Jim Schwartz, we're going to do the defensive line and nothing else thing. And they got great pressure every year, and they looked fine and catch all metrics every year. But anytime they met a good offensive coordinator who was like, hey, I'm going to throw it at the guy with 29-inch arms all game, they lost. And they weren't able to keep points off the board. They simply did not have enough resources to make those necessary changes. And they also had Howie, who was like, let me get my offensive line 6 and my defensive tackle 3 before I get corner 2, because that's how he's always done it. And so that back 7 remains extremely concerning, and the wide receiver room is very unproven. So to me, if you told me the Eagles end up 6-11, I'd be like, oh, not too bad. And that's sitting at that line. So to me, if anything, the Eagles are a little bit overpriced. I think the Giants are right about where they should be.
Wasn't it another former Eagles GM who said we were stupid for saying the coverage was at least as important as pass rush? And
I don't know.
At the heights
I have a short memory.
of their brilliance defensively, we've only seen a decline because, as Ben said, they've done nothing really to throw numbers at the position.
Hey, we traded a 3 for Darius Slay. Watch it.
True, very good
It's
point.
terrible. It's so bad.
Yeah. Great point.
The year that you guys won the Super Bowl, they threw numbers at the position with Darby, Robinson, Jalen Mills, and Rasul Douglas, and Sidney Jones. They did all of it in 1 year, and it was all those guys got hurt at one point, but they had enough numbers where it was 5 choose 4 was enough to win with. And there was a year where all the quarterbacks were hurt in the NFL, so it was perfect.
Patrick Robinson, by the way, was insane.
Yeah, and then he's done nothing, which shows the stability.
They got the wild P-Rob year. They got healthy Darby in the playoffs, and then Jalen Mills broke up that one pass to Julio Jones in the 15-12 game against the Falcons. And once Jalen Mills broke up a Julio Jones pass, you're like, all right, we're never losing again. We're never going to die. This is amazing.
And then you catch a backup quarterback in the NFC title game, and that was a year where that was a strange year where I think. Good on the Eagles for hitting. The Eagles had tons of injuries that year too, but
True.
But they ended up, when it was their year, they won it. So good for them.
I made the really shrewd decision to start with the Giants and the Eagles, knowing that we wouldn't have a ton of time to talk about the Cowboys and the football team, which is fine because that's who everyone wants to talk about. But I do think it's important, and we're going to talk about them. And here's how I'm going to ask you to break this down, Ben. Cowboys versus the football team, agnostic of what their odds are. How would you rank them? And you can kind of go through your thought process, but ultimately, who's the better team here?
Yeah, I think Washington's a better team, which I've thought it for a bit, and I've just been like, all right, don't say this. Don't say this in May. It's a bad idea. But here we are in May, and man, maybe it's just because Ryan Fitzpatrick, the last 2 times he's played the Eagles, has been the Dolphins win 2 years ago, and then the Bucs win.
Yes.
Yeah. Where it's just but that's a classic example of what I was saying, where when you get a quarterback who knows what he's doing or an offense that knows what they're doing, they could beat the Jim Schwartz defense because all they just do was chuck 9 balls at bad corners, just play variance. Fitz is a roller coaster, but he can give you enough up to win some games against some good teams. The rest of the team is very nicely put together. I don't honestly love what they did in terms of the Morgan Moses cut and then bringing Charles Leno, because now you're either playing a second-round rookie in Sammy Cosme at right tackle, or you're playing Cornelius Lucas, which is a journeyman. So I didn't love the change up on the offensive line, so I wasn't a huge fan of that. But defensively at all 3 levels, I think they're stacked. They're going to have the ability to win with light boxes, which is really, really important, and they can play split field. And that's critical for stopping that Shanahan defense, being able to play quarters, which is what they did at a very high level last year. Does Jack Del Rio want to be that team all the time? I'm not sure, but I'm hoping so, because I think that's what they're nicely built to do. I think the William Jackson signing is great. You're going to be able to sit in off cover with Jackson and Fuller and be highly, highly effective, be able to generate some turnovers. I think that defense is very, very strong. Top to bottom, right? I like their line better than the Giants line. I think they're the best defensive group. Big Cole Holcomb guy. Love Cole Holcomb. So I'm all about that. And then the way they built the receiver room is great because it's speed, but all of our speed guys do some different things, right? Terry is speed, but route running, beautiful, intermediate, it's great. Curtis Samuel is speed, but with Scott Turner, he was big depth of target. He's always been, quick underneath touches guy. So you got the short ability. And then with Diami, who was a 3rd-round pick, Diami Brown out of North Carolina, I've got speed, but now I've got deep ball tracking, contested catchability, and all of that. And so they have the ability to rip off explosives. They're going to have an aggressive quarterback who's going to be willing to let those receivers make plays. And I think they're going to have a defense that suffocates. So I like them a lot. Whereas Dallas, Dak's the man. CeeDee's awesome. Yeah, the defense looks horrible. And I don't know how we overlook that.
Yeah, Logan Thomas is also a great target for Washington.
Logan Thomas, he's also very much worthy of mentioning. That's
and they also, and in the backfield, they have good players. They didn't invest a ton in them. I think the problem I have, though, is like the Fitz coaster, just to, like, I agree with you on the rest of the team. I do think the rest of the team is really well put together. I don't think much of Del Rio, but I do think like there is, and they built the defense front to back, which we would not. But then once they've realized the defense is good, they've started to build in reinforcements. William Jackson and Kendall Fuller and company like that. That's a good team, but. With defense, it's almost always you look at Dallas's schedule, and after week 3, they don't play like a team with a winning record for like 10 weeks, from last season. And Dak, if there's one thing Dak can do, it's reliably beat bad teams. And offense, like the consistency of an offense in a schedule with bad teams, that's what I'll take over because I think Fitz gives Washington a better chance to beat a team like Kansas City. But I think it also gives them a better chance to lose to a team like the Jets or whomever.
That's a very, very, very good way of putting it.
That's interesting, though. But I will say this. Fitz has played with terrible teams. You don't see Fitz playing with good teams. And last year you saw that for the first time, and they were good. Like the Miami Dolphins were a playoff team.
But is that actually true? Because I think with Tampa, Tampa legitimately was starting to put pieces into place for their Super Bowl run.
Stop.
When he was,
Tom Brady was the piece for their Super Bowl run. Let's not get it twisted.
I mean, okay, but then even those Buffalo teams had good defenses and good, I think he's been, and like the Jets team, I mean, he melted down against Rex Ryan with a chance to make the playoffs in 15. Like the guy, there's a reason why the guy is always sort of this quarterback.
Yeah,
which is
it's the Harvard bias. People hate.
No, I just again, my issue.
These guys can't catch a break, Eric.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
I'm sorry. The Winklevi now Fitzpatrick.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, never. But my issue. I think again, this is my take on Fitzpatrick in this division. If this was a division whose off-scheduled teams were really hard, and every one of these teams had like implied win total of like 6.5. I'd pick Washington because I think Fitzpatrick can win enough of the games that were their underdogs. But I'm speaking on both sides of my mouth because they're underdogs in all but 3 games. So there's part of that to it. But Dallas is going to be favored in the vast majority of their games. And Dak is not the kind of quarterback that just Dak can kill bad teams. I don't know if he can win games against upper tier teams, but I think he can win 10 games even with a bad defense against teams that don't have great quarterbacks by definition.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I have a point that I want to make, but let me ask you this.
Maybe that's not saying they're better, but maybe that's saying they'll have a better record.
Is Washington not a top tier team? Because that's the team he's going to have to beat to win this division.
I mean, what's the line in those 2 games? Dallas is favored in both those games, right?
And I think I'd bet the football.
Okay.
That's kind of my point, though. I agree with you, but ultimately they do have to beat that team.
I mean, not really. Washington won that division by being swept by the Giants. Though all you have to be is better than them and all the other. You don't need to.
I mean,
you know what I'm
yes
saying?
And no, but there's a reason those games matter so much.
You can match up shittily against a team, which I do think they do match. A more complete team is a better team than the Dallas Cowboys. But I think Dallas's brilliance at the QB position stands out in this division.
The one point I wanted to make, and I'm curious if you agree with me here, Ben, is I said, I think last year, I was like, Terry McLaurin is the best receiver in this division. And people were very angry, of course, the Amari Cooper hive and whatever. I still maintain this. I would take Terry McLaurin over Amari Cooper. I take him over CeeDee Lamb. I take him over Michael Gallup. There's a consistency about him. There's I'm a math guy, but like there's a tenaciousness about like the way he plays football that is just awesome. Where do you stand on that?
We're not taking contracts into account, right?
No.
Yeah, I like Amari. I love Terry, but Amari's. I mean, when we talk about Terry as a route runner, I think he's a premier route runner. I think he's top 5 route runner in the league. Cooper's top 2. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is, like, to me, McLaurin's cardinal trait, Cooper's got him beat on. And McLaurin's got, I think, probably a better deep ball profile than Cooper does, but it's just not what Washington has used him for. And so there's arguments to be made in terms of like the roles you'd put him in and whatnot. But Amari, oh man, he's a delight to watch, and so is Terry. I give it to you, but I can't, in good conscience, say he's better than Cooper.
It's a mentality.
I love watching
thing
Cooper
for me.
play.
It's a mentality thing, like the
Listen,
alphaness that Terry has.
Yeah.
Is special.
We got in trouble for talking about alphaness.
Right. I can't do that. Okay, let me ask you the real question I wanted to ask you, which is about Dak, because I think it is interesting and ultimately comes down to this. So, let's say you're drafting quarterbacks for this year. You're bored, okay?
Usually am.
Yes. You're bored for the quarterback position, drafting quarterbacks for this year and this year alone. Where is Dak on your board?
Oh. So the Athletic football show just did that quarterback draft, and I was literally chatting with Nate Tice about it pre that show, and he was like, make me not put Dak at 2 on the board. And I was like,
wow.
And that's where he ended up taking Dak, and it's okay. Mahomes, top tier. There's nothing real.
Yeah.
Barring what we don't know about Deshaun Watson's future in football, it's difficult to argue Dak, at least not in that next year, with Rodgers and with Lamar, with Allen. They were doing like next 5 years,
yeah, they were doing
included and whatever, right? But if I want to win games, Dak's top 3 probably, because I take Rodgers to win right now, and then it's a question of what's my offense like around Lamar and so on and so forth. The thing is, like, I, as a guy who watched the Wentz who played in 2018 look so physically different than the Wentz who played in 2017. He tore 3 of the 4 ligaments in his knee, right? So like there was a major injury. I always want to see it before I go all the way in, because when your physical profile changes, it drastically affects how you play quarterback, even slightly, right? Like when your arm strength goes from 100 to 90, you better be Drew Brees smart to figure that out. When your athleticism goes from 100 to 90, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you're taking 10 more sacks than you were, and those are impactful plays. So if I get the same Dak I had last year, yeah, 3rd. Let's do it. If I want to know that I have that. And that's my main thing with, Dak can beat bad teams, right? Like Eric was saying. He absolutely can. Cowboys, were going toe-to-toe with the Giants in week 5, right? Like Dak can beat bad teams when he's healthy, but that defense was so bad that they were still making every game a game. You know what I mean? Like they had to have absurd things happen to them in that Falcons game, right? Like it's just they were punching at everybody's weight, no matter if they were good, bad, or otherwise. And that was with Dak at 100. And I want to know that he's back at 100 before I say with my chest, we've got it, we can go, and we can just ride this guy into the playoffs. Because sometimes rehab is not that neat, and it's a dang shame, but it's very tough. And so it's just tough.
So you would go Dak over Josh Allen?
Yeah. Allen was awesome last season. Very much so in the same way that I want to see it with Dak because I want him to be healthy. I also want to see it with Allen because we didn't think that was going to happen. That's a tremendous peak. And if it is his peak, that's great. I'd like to see what the year over year looks like. And I think that with Allen's talent and his recent success is, and you already saw this last year, going to come arrogance. And that arrogance is going to invite bad plays. And his response to that is going to be important because he worked his tail off to get to exactly where he is. And they made it all the way to the tippy top, and they were awesome on offense. They were great. Dabble's back, and Stephon Diggs is there, and everything is hunky-dory. Once you take a step back, because inevitably you do, how you respond to that is important. If you go back to, I can make every throw in the entire world and we'll continue to try, you're going to invite bad plays. You're going to invite some chaos. That's where Allen lives. And as much as I love that, I'd much rather have a quarterback who's all about consistency, which is Dak, which is even like Lamar in terms of his ability to run, as opposed to a guy who lives on that variance. And I know I said I'll ride the Ryan Fitzpatrick roller coaster to an NFC East title for Washington. But when we start getting to middle tier quarterbacks, variance is a lot more. I welcome it a lot more than at the top tier, where I don't want to play that game as much.
Because you need to hit the high variance at some point, like in a game, to win, and you'd rather have a guy who's capable of it. But just to be clear, for this 1 year though, like you're not taking Dak over Tom Brady, are you?
Oh yeah, I'm not taking Dak over Tom. That's right. I never think about Tom. I never think about him in these exercises because
he's just a
44.
meme guy. He's just doing memes. Yeah. That's all he's doing.
Yeah. All right. So if it's just this year, right? It's Mahomes, it's Rodgers, it's Brady.
Are you taking Russ? Because
no, I'm not taking Russ over Dak.
Because our top 6, if you look at our PFF betting tools, Mahomes, and then kind of tied for second is Wilson, Rodgers, Brady. Right, that's just a game today.
Yeah.
Allen 5th, Prescott, Ryan 6th, and I think we're a little high on Ryan, but we've always been high on Ryan. The thing I think about Russell Wilson, which is really interesting, how much of him changed last year in our minds? Because are we hung over from the first 8 weeks of Wilson, coming off of what could have been an MVP year of 2019, and are we so disgusted with him because of the last
I'd like
5-6 weeks of the season?
I'd like to not talk about hangovers personally, but Ben, I want you to break that down and talk, like the Dak Russ thing is fascinating because I've never even considered that. I think we've just always put Russ ahead of him. Now I'm thinking about it, and arguments
Russ has lower odds to win the MVP.
Arguments are coming to mind.
Plus 1,800. Plus 1,800 Russ is. And listen, I am saying this as a man who literally just bet Russell Wilson to win MVP. Like, to me, that's if he wins the NFC West, which is possible.
Yep.
It means that he's got Shane Waldron. I love it. Russ is more high variance in terms of how his process is and how he gets to his good plays than I think we generally talk about off of my watching of him and off of my read of him. And it's not so much the variance of interceptions, which I think is what you expect with Allen, who has kind of scattershot accuracy and challenges tight windows. And it's more so the sacks and the running around and being a little bit of a, crazy guy 18 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Sacks, I'd rather take a sack than throw a pick, but sacks still really hurt. What we saw last year in terms of when they put that additional volume on Russ's plate and how he started to, as we talked about with Kyler and it hurts, become a polarized passer, become a edge of the spectrum passer. I want to work the outside of the numbers. I want to work down the field. I want to work shallow. I don't want to work this area of the field. Well, I remember kind of doing the autopsy on that whole explosion of the let Russ cook movement there in the end of that season. And there was a lot that went into it, and there's Tyler Lockett injury, and there's offensive line playing, whatever, but there was that reality of we're going to play too high, and we're going to make Russ not throw this deep outside ball. And all of a sudden you start to see a player who doesn't have as neat and as clean of a process as Prescott does. And because at the end of the day, no matter what Peter Schrager called me, I'm still a film guy at heart. I want clean process. That's what I want to see how you got there, and I want to see it happen rep after rep. And that's why you have film guys who are really big on Prescott. His process. I was trying to think of a different word because I've said process like 6 times, so that's just the
you
word.
got to trust it. You got to trust it. I mean, you're wearing the freaking hat.
The way that Prescott understands the field pre-snap is, man, it looks like some of those veteran mid-2000 quarterbacks that you've seen stick in the league for super long. Yeah, absolutely. And then the way that he manages a pocket, buys himself half a second, that's top flight stuff. That's unteachable stuff. And so he's very impressive in that regard. I trust Prescott's longevity more than Russ's. For 1 year, I think I'm still taking Dak as well. But maybe I'm still in that 5-year perspective. Prescott's that impressive of a film watch, in my opinion.
It's it's fascinating you say that because you look at a couple of numbers, and Prescott last year, very limited time, but 122 pass rating versus the blitz, and a sack rate.
That tracks.
A sack rate of just 6%. It was 3% the year before. 3% sack rate versus the blitz. Russell Wilson's sack rate overall is almost 8%.
Yeah.
And that you mentioned sacks, like I'm so glad, like pass rating doesn't talk about sacks, and that's an absolute crime. But like Dak Prescott takes a sack almost half as often as Russell Wilson does. Like, that matters. So you make a very compelling argument there. Now, based on that
I
argument,
wish I'd done more prep work for it. I didn't want to talk about this. Like, have more numbers.
No,
I'm just
this
going
is
off my
great.
feel.
This is why these conversations are awesome, because I never know where it's going to go, and it leads us to have more conversations in the future. So you made that case for Dak now. Now I'm all high on Dak. Now I'm rethinking the whole Washington football team over Cowboys love.
Because you're in that basin of football play, which is, do you have an elite quarterback? If the answer is yes, you just belong in a different tier of shit, right? Like, less things have to go less things have to go lucky for you.
Sure.
If your quarterback is Tom Brady, like, you just don't have to get as lucky. You're in the AFC Championship game for 10 freaking years in a row. If we believe what we think about Dak, which is that in 2019 he was the third most valuable player in the league, and last season he was lighting the thing on fire before he got hurt, and modern medicine is such that he'll come back from this, then you have to believe the Dallas Cowboys they're not like the 2018 Chiefs, but that is a model where your defense can be a group of 11 arsonists lighting this thing on fire all the time, but you have a great quarterback, great weapons, and you can overcome it against 11 out of your 17 opponents. Like, that's kind of how I view Dallas. Whereas with Fitzpatrick, you kind of got to get lucky. Like, you kind of got to get lucky more than you do with a guy like Dak.
Yeah. I also will make this point, Ben. I'm curious if you have a thought on this. Like, for Dallas, to me, they have so much scrutiny from a media perspective, and like Jerry Jones is just such an intense guy, and like you feel the extra pressure. It's like it's not a freeing feeling, and every time you do something either good or bad, it gets magnified. And I just feel like for them, it's a little harder to get out of their own way in some situations. So I like that for Washington as well. They get to be under the radar. Harvard guy under the radar. I mean, it's where they're most successful.
We'll never know. We'll never expect it out of them.
When you start going to the coaching and messaging thing, it is true. Like, I have way more trust in Ron Rivera than Mike McCarthy, especially to deal with the general toils and tumbles of a season. I think that if the Cowboys go on I know Eric said they play 3 good teams and 10 bad teams, so maybe not. But if they go on that mid-season lull, if they have a game or 2 games or 3 that they drop, I think things could get weird quickly because of the circumstances under which McCarthy was brought in, because of the change on defense especially, right? Like, they did this whole we're going to be super multiple under Mike Nolan thing, and then they were really bad, and then they changed over to Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn was like, we're going to be super multiple, and it's like, well, I've seen where this went. You need good personnel to be very multiple. I'm not sure you have it. And so
they have linebackers,
I could see, right.
Have linebackers.
That Parsons pick is going to live in my head forever, man. And listen, I like linebackers, like a film guy. Like, I think linebackers are important and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that whole conversation. Even then, you already did the early drafted linebackers. Yeah. It didn't work. You would have thought you would have learned, but no. And so I do see how things could spiral quickly for Dallas, whereas Ron usually runs a steady riverboat, as it were.
Yes, our guy Ron. And Ron, we trust.
I do think Washington's win total of 8 is reasonable, and I wouldn't hate people for betting the over. I actually think Dallas, what's Dallas's record last year if Dak doesn't get injured? So they were 6-10. What's their record if Dak? Because they already lost to the Browns at home with Dak. They lost.
They were 2-3 after he went down.
Yep.
Yeah, they lost to the Rams at home or on the road, which is a bad loss for them.
Seahawks
what's the record?
They lost to.
I think Dak's amazing, and it's maybe 2 games better, maybe.
So they win the division with him.
Yeah, but the division was historically terrible.
But they might not win the Washington game that Ben DiNucci has to play in. They probably win the Arizona Cardinals game on that Monday night. That dreadful,
that game
awful
was the worst thing I've ever seen.
They beat the Giants in Week 17.
You're giving them a lot of credit, man. I'm telling you, Dak can be amazing, but that team it's tough with the scrutiny, and their defense, as Ben said, was so bad. So Cowboys 9.5 plus 107 to the over. You're taking the over?
I mean, at this point, I almost have to.
Yeah, you almost have to. All right. So let's do this really quickly, Ben, because I have one last question for you. Okay. But Dallas Cowboys 9.5 over, a little bit juice juice towards the under. Plus 107.
Haters.
Over, yeah, haters. Minus 130 under. Your call on that one right now if you had to
So
bet.
plus 107 over, minus 130 under.
Yeah.
I would probably take the under, but man, you can't make me talk about Dak for that long.
I
and
know.
then make me go back to being responsible about the Cowboys.
I don't even
and
know
their
what to
whole
think
team
now either.
outlook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably I know they have a soft schedule. I'd probably still lean under because I just don't know how many shootouts you can win, and that's where I think they're going to be as a team. And then accordingly, I do like the Washington over at 8. If there's a line I feel good about, it's that one.
Yeah. I'm
Washington over 8 is what?
minus 141.
141.
Oh, ew.
They're plus 260 to win the division, though.
Yeah, I think that's how
I have that. I own that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually, it has your name next to it.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to close out with this. We have a new segment that we do on Sundays where Eric and I try to give a recommendation for something that we've either used, or Eric watches movies unlike me, and so he'll give recommendations on a good movie he's seen.
It'll be a book this week. I need to be more cultured.
Yeah, thanks. A lifestyle choice, anything that you want, because we like to diversify our lives and include more good things in them. And I have a feeling that you have a lot of recommendations that you are just itching to give people based on your Twitter feed. Based on
My
your Twitter
mother
feed.
taught me how to give free advice. I've been talking about my mom a lot in this podcast for some reason, but she did, and so I know how. No, my recommendation this week is not a book, it's not a movie, it's go outside. Weather's been beautiful in Michigan. It's been 75 and sunny, so it's too hot, but also it's the first time of year where it is too hot, and you get to go outside and get a sweat going. I'm a big fisher. I went fishing
Really?
2 times in the past week. Had a great time. Every single day I wake up and I start working and I'm tippy-tapping away and I'm watching film, whatever. And I'm like, why do I feel bad? Why do I feel grumpy? Why do I feel gross? And I take the dog out and I get a breath of fresh air and I'm like, you're dumb. You just need to go outside. And so, man, it's May. It's verdant. It's beautiful. I'm so happy every time I go outside. My rec is go take a hike. Go fish for a fish. Feels good.
George took Aaron Nagler's recommendation seriously. I'm going to take yours. We just moved to a new house. And I had a great routine of biking places and stuff. And I've spent the last few days just trapped inside. I took a couple meetings in the morning on my walk. But I just need to do what you're saying.
Vitamin D.
I just need to take more meetings while on walks. I feel like that's such a boss move, and I need to start doing that.
It's a great move. My follow-up question to you, Ben, is if someone is not a fisherman,
Have you ever? Here's a question, George.
which is me.
Have you ever gone fishing?
Okay, I have gone fishing,
Okay.
but I wouldn't know if you would call it fishing. It was one of those things where it was I was young and I was like, Mom, I want to go fishing.
Yeah,
I don't know
of
why.
course.
And my mom's like, oh God. So we go to a place that's a man-made pond
Come
to
on.
fish. Dude,
koi and stuff?
it was legitimately the worst experience of my life. I didn't even come close to catching a fish. I don't think there were fish in there, to be perfectly honest
Right.
with you. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm asking Ben now, let's say I want to restart this and I want to do it the right way. How do I get started?
Well, you go over the Ohio. I'm just kidding.
Stop.
Now, honestly, fishing YouTube is the bomb. If you want a good YouTube hole, you can go
Really?
from 65-year-old, leather skin, white hair, 2 pairs of sunglasses, shirt tucked into jeans, down
Yeah.
southerner, teaching you how to fish for a bass in a Florida Everglade while he barely pays attention to the camera, doesn't know how his mic works, to young dudes who are producing sick videos of crazy slow motion catches. Fishing YouTube is a sick YouTube hole to fall down, and it's also super informative and a very supportive and fun community. I am very big on everybody needs to go fishing at least once in their life.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's
way
a
different
critical
than-
life experience. Everybody needs to sit in a boat, put a line in the water, and feel completely inferior to a very dumb animal for 4 hours. It's a humbling and valuable experience.
Yeah, that's way different than my uncle who just would call me a pansy for not wanting to take the fish off the hook with my own hands.
Well, yeah, that's kind of a pansy move.
It is, but when you're young, right? Those things are sharp, George.
I know we've learned that you're a pansy now.
No,
So,
I was called one.
all right, I'm
was
gonna
great.
put it on my list. I'm gonna have to try.
We have to go fishing somewhere.
I'm gonna have to go fishing. You know when might be the time? I'm going to Cabo a couple times, and that could.
You can
be,
100% do charter fishing in Cabo. It'd be amazing.
That would be kind of a cool.
You're just
move.
gonna fish. You might go snorkeling. You just grab one with your bare hands.
I'm gonna have a new career. I'm gonna turn into a YouTube fisherman, and Ben's gonna be watching my videos for once. So
Listen, when I'm avoiding work at 12:30 in the morning, George Shahori, Fishing Channel
there
could be
it is.
great.
That'd be an incredible turnaround and about face. Benjamin Solak, the Draft Network, at Benjamin Solak on Twitter. You've got to follow him if you do not, for the football and the other things like his hatred of fruit, which next time we will get into. That's a
Fine with that.
teaser if I've ever heard one, by the way. Ben, thanks so much, brother. This was awesome.
I appreciate it, fellas. Y'all be well.
Special thanks to Benjamin for being so generous at this time. Great conversation. We'll have him on again. As I said, the fruit thing we have to discuss. I wanted to bring it up. You even had another story that we didn't get a chance to talk about. So we'll be back with you guys on Sunday. Of course, we have a couple of really good ideas for that. And of course, recommendations on Sunday from both of us. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys later. Peace.